Hello, friends. Welcome to Return of the Remnant Ministry. Again, this week we're going to steer away from Revelation for just a little bit, and I thought I would put together a teaching called the I Wills of Zephaniah. This is something I've been thinking about for a while. A few months ago, my parents came to visit Marilyn and I, and we did a study on the book of Zephaniah. And I believe it was my mom who mentioned these I wills that are in Zephaniah chapter 3. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And so, as I've had a chance to chew on it a little bit and consider some of the ramifications and promises of these I wills, I thought I would share them with you today. This should be a fairly quick teaching. Again, I have a couple other teachings in the works right now with the Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day, as we are fast approaching, for many of us anyway, the 7th month of the Hebrew calendar, which entails the fall feasts of God's um, feast days that we can find in Leviticus 23. So for today, though, we're going to get into these I wills of Zephaniah. And I have on here, Yahweh your Elohim is with you. He is mighty to save. He will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. And just as a side note, one reason why I wanted to put this together is many of us are looking at the things going on in the world right now. Many of us believe we're in the end days or very, very close to the end days. And if anything, this should be a teaching that should give you encouragement as we get into the birth pangs and more of the issues that we see in Revelation start coming to light. And I truly believe we're that last generation, and I believe we're fast approaching what John was able to write about in the book of Revelation. So with that, what are these I wills? Well, first off, I want to get into Exodus chapter 6. Many of us who are Hebrew roots, Messianic, or even in Judaism, there is in the Passover Seder around Passover when we go in, we do the Passover Seder. There are some cups that are used in this Seder or retelling of the children of Israel leaving Egypt out of the house of bondage, out of the house of slavery. And these I wills that I'm going to read to you in Exodus are basically what in Judaism and in Hebrew roots and Messianic circles we use during the Passover Seder, these cups that we drink. And they're all based off of this passage here in Exodus 6. It says, Elohim also said to Moshe, I am Yahweh. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am Yahweh, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your Elohim. Then you will know that I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And I will bring you to the land I swore with an uplifted hand to give to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. I will give it to you as a possession. I am Yahweh. So we see these I wills here. And in some circles, it's either the 4 cups or the 5 cups that are used to signify and reflect on these I wills that God said to Moses, and later he made good on them as he brought the children of Israel into the promised land. But we know, and I keep hammering on this, we know that there's a greater exodus that is coming. In Ezekiel 20, verses 33 to 38, it says the following: As surely as I live, declares Yahweh Tsevaot, I will reign over you with a mighty hand, and with outstretched arm, and with outpoured fury. That sounds a lot like Exodus 6, where it says, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, with mighty acts of judgment. So even though it says with fury poured out and wrath, we have to understand that this fury and this wrath that we read about here in Ezekiel is dealing more with judgments of the trumpets as his people are going through the tribulation. There could be some fury or wrath poured out, but I know that Scripture tells us that Yah's people are not destined to the fury or wrath of Yahweh. Continuing on here, verse 35, I will bring you into the wilderness of the nations, and there face to face I will execute judgment upon you. As I judge your ancestors in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will judge you, declares Yahweh Tsevaot. I will take note of you as you pass under my rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I will purge you of those who revolt and rebel against me. Very similar to what happened in the book of Exodus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, where Yah purged those that were disobedient or unfaithful to him as he brought them out of Egypt into the wilderness before bringing them into the promised land. Verse 38 again, I will purge you of those who revolt and rebel against me. Although I will bring them out of the land where they are living, yet they will not enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am Yahweh. And in my opinion, this verse here is something that has not happened yet. This is going to happen during the Great Tribulation, which we read about in the book of Revelation. Key in on these verses. I mentioned the one in verse 34. Also look at verse 38. I will purge you out of the land. Well, I will purge you of those who revolt and rebel against me. Well, this is nothing different than what we read about in the book of Exodus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, where those who revolted against Yahweh or rebelled against him did not enter the land. And he says here, although I will bring them out of the land where they are living, yet they will not enter the land of Israel. So this is, again, there's a pattern here. So let's go and talk about the I Wills of Zephaniah. And at the bottom here, I have something to add in the Passover Seder, because although in the Passover Seder, we reflect a lot on the original Exodus, and in some circles of Messianic and Hebrew rooters that are out there, including myself, I like to try and incorporate the Mashiach, Yeshua HaMashiach, the Son of God, in with the Passover Seder, and bring in some scriptures from the Brit Hadashah, the so-called New Testament, and bring them in to relate some of the promises that Yeshua also tells us about. And we'll get to that as well. But these I Wills of Zephaniah are something that we may want to consider putting into the Passover Seder at the very least. But this is more for us to keep in mind. These promises are for us. The promises that we read about, the I Wills in Exodus chapter 6, dealt with that generation as they left Egypt. These I Wills of Zephaniah are dealing with this or that generation, the generation I believe that we're living in right now. And so let's read that with that mindset. This is in Zephaniah chapter 3, around verse 15 to 20. Sing, daughter Zion, shout aloud, Israel. Be glad and rejoice with all your heart, daughter Jerusalem. Yahweh has taken away your punishment. He has turned back your enemy. Yahweh, the King of Israel, is with you. Never again will you fear any harm. On that day, they will say to Jerusalem, do not fear, Zion. Do not let your hands hang limp. Yahweh, your Elohim, is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. And then here's some I wills to keep in mind. At that time, I will deal with all who oppressed you. I will rescue the lame. I will gather the exiles. I will give them praise and honor in every land where they have suffered shame. At that time, I will gather you. At that time, I will bring you home. I will give you honor and praise among all the peoples of the earth when I restore your fortunes before your very eyes, saith Yahweh. And so, as I continue on this short teaching, meditate on those I will verses. Meditate on them. You're going to see here again, the Bible is all about patterns, parallels. He breaks cyclical teachings where things will repeat themselves again. What happens to the forefathers will happen to the children. And when we need to look at that, we also need to look at scripture, not only in a Greek linear mindset from A to B, a timeline, if you will, or a sequence, but we also need to look at it from a Hebraic perspective that if it happened here, it's going to happen again here. It's going to continue the cyclical of Hebraic mindset and thought. So I want to show you the pattern here of the Exodus out of Egypt that we read about in the Torah, and also what we read about in the end days greater Exodus. So here, the Exodus out of Egypt, in the book of Exodus, and in Numbers and Deuteronomy, leading into the book of Joshua, if you will, Yahweh brings Israel out of Egyptian bondage. He brings them into freedom from the slavery that they were in. And he also redeemed them through many judgments. We see that with Moses and Aaron, the two witnesses against Antichrist Pharaoh, if you will, right? And so these plagues, these judgments happen throughout the land of Egypt as Yahweh is redeeming his people. And we read about in Exodus that Yahweh is going to take them as his people to be their God, not the gods of Egypt, but that he would take them and that he would be their Elohim. Yahweh does make good, even though many rebelled, and only Joshua and Caleb and women and those that were of the next generation that were actually under 20 years old when they were counted in the census. Those are the ones that made it in to the promised land. And so Yahweh did make good, bringing Israel into the promised land. And when he brought them in, he allowed them the conquest and to give them the inheritance of the land, which, according to my calculations of chronology, happened in a Jubilee year, that they came into Israel, into Canaan, the promised land, and was able to obtain their inheritance. So now if we look at the end days, the end days Exodus, which we kind of read about in Zephaniah chapter 3, Yahweh is going to gather those. And I find this very interesting. You'll have to go back and read chapter 3, and you'll have to look at different translations. But Yahweh is going to gather those who have been driven from the feast days. And I know a lot of us out there right now who are trying to follow Leviticus 23 and the things that Yahweh wants us to do. We can pursue, but we cannot completely fulfill what Yahweh requires of us on these feast days. But we can certainly try with all of our heart, mind, and soul, and we can show him our willingness to do the best we can on observing Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the first fruits, the Shavuot, and then the fall feast with Yom Teruah that's coming up here in very soon, in just a few days, and trying to do our best on Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and during the Feast of Sukkot and the 8th day, which again I'll be doing a teaching on that. I'll try and get it posted during Sukkot so people have a chance to look at that. But we see, again, he's going to gather those who have been driven from the Moedim. And there's going to come a day where we may not even be able to celebrate them. We may be in captivity. We also see here in Zephaniah that Yahweh is going to deal with those who oppress his people. So just like when Pharaoh oppressed Israel in the land of Egypt, we're going to be dealing with oppression from the Antichrist, in my opinion. Yahweh's going to rescue the lame. He's going to gather the exiles, just like he did in Egypt in the Exodus. And you remember it said that when Israel came out, it said also a mixed multitude came out with them. I think it's in Exodus 12, 40, 41, 42, somewhere in there. We also see that Yahweh is going to give his people praise and honor wherever they were scattered. And just like Israel plundered the Egyptians when they left, and they left out with mighty pomp, we see something similar here. Again, the pattern, Yahweh brought Israel out of Egypt and brought them into the promised land. Here we see Yahweh's going to gather us wherever we've been scattered around the world and bring us back home. Again, the land inheritance. And then it says in Zephaniah, Yahweh is going to restore our fortunes and give his people praise and honor among all the peoples of the earth. And I find it interesting. I believe if you follow out Exodus chapter 6, there's about 7 I wills. And in Zephaniah, it's kind of a stretch, but there's also around 7 I wills too, depending on how you want to look at it. So I find it interesting. So hopefully you see this here with the Exodus of Israel leaving Egypt, that shadow picture of something greater that we read about here in Zephaniah, in chapter 3 of Zephaniah. Now, Satan also has some counterfeit I wills, not trying to beat the I wills to death here, but let's take a look at the I wills that Satan has. And remember, everything that we see with the I wills of Exodus in Exodus chapter 6 and Zephaniah chapter 3 are all centered on Yah's people. But here, Satan's I wills are centered on himself. So if we look at Isaiah 14, 12 through 19, it says, "How you are fallen from heaven, O shining star, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to the earth, you who destroy the nations of the world. For you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I will preside on the mountain of the gods far away in the north. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High." So those are Satan's I wills. And for a short period of time, he's partly going to have that through the Antichrist. But what do we see here? Instead, you will be brought down to the place of the dead, down to its lowest depths. Everyone there will stare at you and ask, can this be the one who shook the earth and made the kingdoms of the world tremble? Is this the one who destroyed the world and made it into a wasteland? Is this the king who demolished the world's greatest cities and had no mercy on his prisoners? The kings of the nations lie in stately glory, each in his own tomb, but you will be thrown out of your grave like a worthless branch, like a corpse trampled underfoot. You will be dumped into a massive grave with those killed in battle. You will descend to the pit. And we know what happens. We know that when Yeshua comes back, Revelation 19, 19:20, somewhere right in there, with all the saints, that Satan is going to be bound and he's going to be thrown. He's going to be thrown and locked up for 1,000 years during the millennial reign. And then after that millennial reign, he'll be let loose for a short period of time. And then he'll be thrown into the bottomless pit after that happens. But the good thing is our Heavenly Father, he makes good on his I wills. And these are just a few that are scattered around. But in Deuteronomy 31:6, he tells us that he will never leave us or forsake us. In Isaiah 41:10, Yahweh tells us that he will strengthen us and help us. He will uphold us with his righteous right hand. Ezekiel 36, Yahweh tells us that he is going to give us a new heart and put a new spirit in us. He also tells us through the prophet Jeremiah, "But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days." After those days, we're talking end days, people. "After those days, saith Yahweh, I will put my Torah in their inner parts and write it in their hearts. I will be their Elohim and they shall be my people." So the same law, Torah, if you will. I better be careful when I say that. I'll skip ahead on that, but essentially the things that God expects out of us right now, not to commit adultery, not to murder, the feast days, keeping the Sabbath, all the things that we read about that apply to each and every one of us. he's going to write that on us, and we're going to be able to properly do what he wants. And it's going to be fantastic to not try and understand when the new month is, how to observe the new month, or how the joy and freedom of keeping the Sabbath, and so many things I could get into, but I'm not going to go too deep in that, because I know there's going to be people that are going to twist that into something else. But remember, in the New Testament, the renewed covenant is not found there. It is found right here in Jeremiah 31, 33, and I believe 34. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith Yahweh. I'll put my law, my Torah, in their inward parts, and write it in their hearts, and will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And we see here in Revelation 21, verse 3, this is the 8th day, okay? The new beginnings, the day that has no end, that begins after the millennial reign of Yeshua HaMashiach, when he gives the kingdom back to the Father. I believe that's in 1 Corinthians 15, towards the end, that Paul talks about. But the Father tells us, I will dwell with them, and they will be my people. All these things are going to happen. And not to beat this down too bad, but I want to use this as encouragement to all you out there who are trying to follow God's will and his instructions, and also have the testimony of Yeshua, as it says in Revelation 12:17 and 14:12, the definition of a saint who keeps commandments of Elohim and has a testimony of Yeshua. But here's Yeshua's I wills for the overcomers of Revelation. Remember, these are 7 I wills too. And as I've said in the past, the seven churches, if I can get my fingers up, the 7 churches, I believe, deal more with the state of believers, where they're at in their walk, just as they were in the first century, leading out throughout history up until today. I don't necessarily believe their church ages, but Yeshua has a lot to say about those who overcome what's coming. Yeshua tells us that he is going to give overcomers fruit from the tree of life in the paradise of Elohim. We read about that later in Revelation 21 and 22, I believe. Yeshua also is going to, he tells us that overcomers are not going to be harmed by the second death. This one is a little tricky. There's some different translations out there, but for now, for the sake of argument, I'm going to just give what the King James has here. But Yeshua is going to give each one of us a white stone. And on that stone will be engraved with a new name that no one understands except the one who receives it. I believe it's a new testimony, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeshua also is going to give us, the overcomers, authority over all the nations, that they will rule the nations with an iron rod and smash them like clay pots. Yeshua also says for overcomers, he's never going to erase their names from the book of life, but he will announce our names before his Father and our Father, and his Elohim and our Elohim, and his angels, that they are his. He also is going to write on the overcomers the name of his Elohim, and they will be citizens in the city of his Elohim, the new Jerusalem that comes down from heaven from Yeshua's Elohim. And I'll also write on them my new name. And lastly, Yeshua tells us that the overcomers, those who are victorious, will have the opportunity to sit with him on his throne. So again, wonderful sets of 7 here. The 7 I wills in Exodus in the past that Yah made good on. The 7 I wills of Zephaniah that are going to happen in the end days that the Father will make good on, because that's his nature. And even here, the 7 I wills that Yeshua promises for the overcomers that we read about in Revelation. So I say this as encouragement for everyone out there who are holding fast to the testimony of Yeshua and and trying to be Torah pursuant as best they can. And so I just want to say, this is the last slide here. We need to continue to be on the alert and continue to hold on to what we have, which is the testimony of Yeshua and the commandments of our Elohim, including the feast days, and you know what they are. For most of the people on this channel, you understand those things. But I want you to understand a couple things. Number one, know for certain that Yahweh Elohim the Father is going to make good on his promises, like what we just read about in Zephaniah chapter 3 and several other scriptures, which I showed. There's plenty more out there. And also know for certain that Yeshua HaMashiach, the Son of the Most High God, will return as King, and he will save us and will reward all his faithful saints, his faithful servants. That is what I have. I hope and pray that you got something out of this teaching. And I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity, maybe to take a page out of Zephaniah 3 and maybe put that in your Passover Seder, especially coming into 2026. You might want to add some of the I wills, because even though there's things that happen back in Egypt in the Exodus, we see what's going to be happening in this greater Exodus that we read about in Ezekiel 20 and also here in Zephaniah 3 and several other places. So with that, I hope and pray that this was a blessing. You got something out of it, and stick around. I should be getting a couple more teachings in the next couple weeks out to you. If I don't see you, I hope you have a great Hak Sameach, and may the Lord bless you richly. Shalom.